Think about finding out that the person you've been with for a very long time is not who you thought they were. Well, that's exactly what happened when the police came to this couple's home one morning. Let's find out what the wife did when she found out the truth after being married for more than 40 years. It all started like a regular morning. Cheryl heard a knock on the door, and since her husband Bobby was still in bed, she went to see who it was so early. When she looked through the door, she saw police officers. Cheryl didn't think much of it. She assumed they were there for one of her neighbors. So, she opened the door without knowing what would happen next. As soon as she did, 12 FBI agents rushed in, and she could tell something was wrong. The officers quickly went to the back bedroom where Bobby was sleeping. One of the cops asked Bobby for his real name, and Bobby whispered something in response. After that, they put handcuffs on Bobby and took him outside. Cheryl was completely upset and didn't know what to do. The scene unfolding before her eyes seemed unreal. She tried to defend her husband by asking what the officers were doing. Bobby told her that this event stemmed from a past situation before the couple met. It turns out that Bobby Love's real name was Walter Miller. He grew up in North Carolina in the 1960s in a low-income family with a total of 8 children. Because Walter's mother was struggling to support her family, it was easy for him to go unnoticed. His run-ins with the law began in 1964 and increased rapidly as he became more and more involved in criminal behavior. He himself admitted to stealing purses from unlocked cars, stealing checks from mailboxes, and getting more and more brazen. These crimes were all a quick way to get money, but gradually, they turned into bigger and more serious crimes. Walter even ended up in a juvenile detention center after stealing from the music room at school. The other inmates were violent toward Walter, who even now still has scars, while he was in juvenile detention. Walter could hear the trains passing outside, which reminded him of the freedom he no longer had. Rather than waiting for his sentence to end, Walter decided to cut his time in juvenile detention by escaping. He ran out the back door and followed the sound of the train. Walter was somehow quick enough to break out of juvenile detention. He followed the rails and found out where the train was going. He boarded it and traveled from North Carolina to Washington, D.C. to live with his brother. While staying in his brother's city apartment, Walter managed to enroll in a local high school. Things went wrong when he came into contact with troublemakers. Walter was hanging out with the wrong people, and it didn't stop there. He started to engage in criminal behavior again, and this time, it was not just innocent actions. They went the extra mile by robbing banks. Walter found they could get away with it because they did this in North Carolina, where security was not as strict, making it easier to carry out the robberies. Walter joined this group, and after several robberies, Walter and his friends finally ran out of luck. They went into a bank to do their usual procedure, but they hadn't realized that this bank had a silent alarm. By the time Walter left the building, the police were already waiting. He tried to escape, but he was shot. Walter's crimes were so serious that he would not go to juvenile detention again. This time, he could be sentenced to 25 to 30 years in prison. Walter became even more confused when he discovered that his mother had died. Walter tried to appeal several times, but it was rejected each time. Instead, he focused on his behavior as a prisoner and managed to get no points on his criminal record. As a result, he was able to move from a maximum security prison to a minimum security facility. The minimum security prison had many perks that helped Walter feel more at ease. It seemed that Walter was finally getting better after a period of difficult years. When problems arose with a prison warden, things went downhill for him again. Everything changed when Walter was accused of berating the prison warden. As a result, the prison warden began to crack down on Walter. He regularly wrote Walter up for violations to the point that Walter was just one negative report away from being sent back to the maximum security prison. He also had to wake up earlier than other inmates to pick up trash along the way. This enabled Walter to plan another escape. He couldn't stand being locked up anymore and started devising an escape plan. Walter noted that Tuesday morning security guard allowed detainees to board the bus without having to search them. This was against procedure, and he also knew that the bus stopped at an intersection near the forest. One Monday night, Walter decided it would be his last day in prison. The next morning, he put on his civilian clothes under his prison clothes and emptied his locker. When the prisoners were loaded onto the bus, Walter chose a strategic location near the emergency exit. As the bus slowed and approached the intersection, Walter swung open the emergency exit and fled the vehicle. He ran into the woods, doing his best to ignore the sirens behind him. Walter managed to reach the station, where he boarded a bus to New York. On the bus, someone asked Walter what his name was, to which he replied, "Bobby Love." This was the beginning of his new life. Bobby arrived in New York in 1977 and ended up on the street after his money ran out. He managed to obtain a fake birth certificate, social security number, and even a driver's license. These documents allowed Bobby to do odd jobs and earn money. By the time the 80s arrived, Bobby had created a whole new life for himself. He had landed a job at the Baptist Medical Center in Brooklyn. This was also where he met Cheryl. Cheryl was just 21 years old when she married Bobby, who was 34 at the time. They soon had a daughter named Jasmine, followed by another girl named Jessica. A decade later, Cheryl gave birth to twins, Jordan and Justin. Bobby became a real family man. He had 2 jobs to support his family and volunteered at the church. Still, he couldn't forget his past and the great secret he kept from everyone, even his wife Cheryl. Bobby really wanted to tell his wife, but he also knew he couldn't risk it. Instead, Bobby told his sister to tell Cheryl the truth after he passed away. That way, she would know one day. However, Bobby's plan backfired, and the police showed up at his house. Bobby eventually returned to North Carolina for a relative's funeral and hoped no one would recognize him. However, someone noticed and reported him to the police. Bobby had to serve the rest of his prison sentence, plus extra time for his escape. Even though Cheryl had to think a lot about what happened, she decided to go and see Bobby in prison. He was worried that Cheryl might leave him, but she surprised him by saying, "No, Bobby Love, I married you in good times and bad times." Cheryl's determination made her fight for Bobby's freedom. She asked everyone they knew to write letters saying good things about Bobby, and she did the same. Cheryl did everything she could to help her husband. Surprisingly, all this effort paid off. After spending a year in prison, Bobby was set free. Now he was free in more ways than one. He didn't have to keep his past a secret anymore. Since his secret was out, and he was no longer a wanted person, their marriage became even better than before. What do you think of this life story? Let us know in the comments section. Thank you.